Welcome to Chapter 1-1 of the Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn Woman Only Challenge, the chapter where the actual pain and suffering starts. For this chapter, we are introduced to the newest addition to the team, Nolan. But he does not possess the equipment required to join the front line, so I'll have to wait until my next playthrough of Radiant Dawn for some action. Objectively, this chapter should be easier, considering it's an escape map. All we need to do is get Micaiah to the other side of the map, onto the escape tile. Simple, right? I am obligated to first try and beat this level solely using women, so Micaiah is sent into the front lines. The first plan I had was to rush through the enemy lines to reach the enemy boss Isaiah, but there's a catch to this plan. The catch is that there are 4 fighters on aggressive AI, and they are ready to turn Micaiah into minced meat. On top of that, there is a 10 turn time limit to this map, meaning that if we do not reach the escape point by the end of turn 10, we get a free game over. In case it wasn't bad enough, on turn 8, 9 and 10, enemy reinforcements come from behind, meaning we will get surrounded and swarmed by enemies if we do not rush through. Unfortunately, Micaiah needs 3 attacks to kill a single enemy, and there are 5 enemies blocking her path towards the boss. Another issue is that the boss is standing on top of the escape tile. We need a minimum of 15 turns to reach the boss, but we only have 10 turns to escape. I actually got lucky and dodged a lot of would-be fatal attacks, making Micaiah survive way longer than she should have. First, she dodged a 68% attack, which using through hit is actually 79% accuracy, making her survive the next enemy's attack. She then dodged a 62 and 63% attack, right after each other, granting her level 5. For level 5, Micaiah got every defensive stat, excluding HP and a point of speed, which will all contribute to her survivability. For the final attack that could lead to her death, she dodged again, somehow, leaving only one aggressive fighter left, who also somehow managed to miss Micaiah. The enemy reinforcements finally show up from behind, and because my men have no way of running away, they will get attacked. But they're all unequipped, so they won't fight back. With my insane luck, Micaiah finally killed every initial fighter blocking her way, and I rushed forward being mindful of the enemy ranges. Right in time for the game over screen, because it's already turn 10. How wonderful. Even with close to perfect RNG, I only got through half the level before my time ran out. Sadly, this will be the first chapter where we refer to Rule 4 of the Woman Only Challenge. If a chapter is impossible, some men may be used as a meat shield to block and bait enemies. I feel horrible having to use men this early on, but I can't see any universe where Micaiah somehow walks past all the enemies without getting surrounded and dying. But my men will not raise their weapons. They will stand in the way of enemies, lure them to different positions and shove them out of the way so that Micaiah can do the rest. Trust me when I say this. Even with unarmed men being used as bait, this chapter is still as hard as ever. I've basically turned this game into a sliding puzzle. So, in my second attempt, I decided to block off those 2 fighters on the right side of Nolan to remove half of the initial enemies. Edward and Micaiah will also stand next to each other, so that they can only get attacked from one side. I also decided to kill one of the fighters to avoid overcrowding, ensuring that Micaiah has a clear path forward. The enemies wail on Nolan, while Nolan shrugs off all the damage by chucking a vulnerary. I started to get worried that because the boss was a Myrmidon, he would have enough speed to double Micaiah, effectively one-rounding her. But luckily, because the enemy boss Isaiah decided to wield a solid block of concrete as a weapon, his speed is reduced by 4 points, making him unable to double Micaiah. The first fighter is finally killed by Micaiah, opening our path. Nolan also finally gets freed from his cage because of the fighter switching aggro to Edward. Leonardo moves up next to Edward, blocking the back alley path to eventually prevent the enemy reinforcements from moving up. However, the next problem that presents itself is much harder to deal with. The immobile fighter that refuses to move, no matter what you do. Meaning, we need to spend 3 turns killing him to progress. I then also realized that there are a bunch of enemies to the left that will attack Micaiah once she comes into range, which she has to be to kill the immobile fighter. The archer and soldier are closest and most threatening because of their high accuracy. I then risked it by commanding Micaiah to attack the enemy fighter while within enemy ranges. Nolan is also sent to stand behind Micaiah, hopefully somehow pulling aggro away from her. Leonardo and Edward take a beating, but they are under no threat of dying. But the same cannot be said about Micaiah. The archer runs up and shoots her point blank. And then the soldier finishes the job by doing this goofy jump.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
I honestly cannot explain why I did the exact same strategy the following attempt. But never mind my stupidity, because for the next attempt I finally changed my plan. In case you are wondering why the fighters go for my men instead of fragile Micaiah, it is because the enemies are scared of being retaliated against. She can fight back, the men can't. I managed to clear the path by turn 3, allowing Micaiah to go through without killing that one fighter. Leonardo and Edward move up again, blocking the path. The enemies even cleared the way, so that Nolan can come help Micaiah by acting as her shield. But I unfortunately forgot that this soldier in front of the door is wielding a 2-range javelin, and he hit Micaiah, almost one-shotting her. And then, just like the past few attempts, the same soldier kills her. After yet another game over, I started brainstorming different formations. For this attempt, I tried reusing an old strategy of killing the first fighter while also shoving Micaiah forward with Leonardo. I also moved Nolan into the javelin dude's range, so that he targets him instead of Micaiah. And it actually worked. He went for Nolan instead of her, and Micaiah survived the soldier's attack. My happiness ended rather quickly when I realized there's no further way of progressing. Micaiah had virtually nowhere to go, and would surely die to the soldier-archer combo like before, so I restarted. Most of the following attempts never ended in Micaiah dying, just me restarting the level after realizing that this setup will not work. Any restart will increase the game over total, because it is basically the same thing, just faster. I tried rushing again, but I just got completely surrounded, with once again the threat of being shot to death by the approaching archer, so that's a restart. This time I sent Edward in for some reason. I don't exactly know why, I cannot explain what I was trying to accomplish here. Somehow Edward dodged the javelin. But sadly Nolan was stuck between the fighters and I had no way of accessing his bulkiness. You can visually see my frustrations through my spamming here. After a few more seconds I decided this run was lost and restarted. The next run was quick as I managed to get surrounded on turn 2 and forgot to free Vulnerary. On the attempt thereafter, I accidentally pressed wait on Micaiah, leaving her in a really dangerous position, so I restarted. But that mistake made me realize the final strategy. On turn 1, I sent Nolan into javelin range, so that he's closer to the left hand side. I also decided not to get the vulnerability on this turn, to rather prioritize shoving. But now comes my shocking revelation that I discovered through my mistake on the last attempt. The enemies can move past each other. I know, right? Who could have guessed that? In my defense, I was doing this chapter at midnight, so I wasn't thinking clearly. But this personal discovery means that Micaiah can stand here safely and the fighter can move past the soldier. And the fighter took the bait, ignoring Micaiah and going straight for my boy Edward. And just like that, I cleared the path of fighters on turn 3, with Nolan to move around as he wishes. I now had to deal with that immobile fighter from before, who is surprisingly still busy being immobile after all these attempts. The obvious first step was ensuring that Nolan blocks off the enemies on the left, so that Micaiah doesn't get obliterated. So, with the path secured, Micaiah started blasting the fighter. I also made sure that Leonardo and Edward don't die. I end my turn, and suddenly my heart stops. Those fighters are in range of Micaiah. Micaiah gets hit, taking a crippling 12 damage, leaving her in a dire state of getting one shot by the next attack. And then I remember, the archer is in range of Micaiah, meaning my discovery hadn't solved anything. Wait, what? Somehow, the stars have aligned and Micaiah dodged a literal bullet, surviving the round. I was stunned, flabbergasted even, but I knew the challenge wasn't over yet. Micaiah survived, true enough, but she's still surrounded by 2 fighters and an archer. Not to mention that Leonardo and Edward are running for their life, but luckily, that old lady was still waiting there for Leonardo to come back and ask for a vulnerary. I was visibly confused and frustrated that I didn't see the solution, but that's when I got a vision of turn 1 for this attempt. A vision of Leonardo shoving Micaiah into closer range. My man Nolan came in clutch and shoved the immobile fighter out of the way, and with this he got promoted to Brolin. With him out of the way, Micaiah runs into the boss room, purposefully standing next to the fighter to ensure that the archer doesn't shoot her. And now it's the enemy's turn to knock it past my immovable fighter, Brolin. Micaiah gets hit, but replies by killing him the next turn. Edward runs all the way to the back to pick up the vulnerary that Leonardo got as a gift, and both of them brace themselves for a swarm of enemies. The final step of the puzzle was getting onto the escape tile. I decided to focus on killing the boss, because the guy next to him one-shots Micaiah with the hand axe. Firstly, Micaiah heals to full HP. Then Micaiah asks the boss to please step aside, which I doubt he'll be doing, so she chooses violence. It will take 3 turns to kill him, and luckily I have enough turns remaining. All I now had to do was make sure that nobody else dies. All of a sudden, the boss decides just runs away off of his escape tile to go and attack Brolin. And just like that, the escape tile opened, and it couldn't have been better timing. If Isaiah had chosen not to step aside like Micaiah asked, Edward would have been blown to bits by the archer reinforcement that just arrived. I look at the field of enemies one last time, reminiscing about that lovely Isaiah that so kindly stepped aside as per Micaiah's request. Then I run off into the distance, escaping and clearing the map. How did the others escape? I don't really know, that's their problem. All that matters is that I survived chapter 1-1 using only women. This was a tricky chapter to solve, but it's nothing in comparison to chapter 1-2 that's coming up next.